Welcome to Busted Speakers, I'm Alex.
And I'm Ed.
And today we're reviewing whatever number album this is by Sufjan Stevens, The Ascension. I say that because there are different levels of what constitutes an album by Sufjan Stevens.
That is true.
His last properly major one, I would say, was 2015's Carrie and Lowell. He has done quite a myriad of side projects / semi-official projects since then. Some great stuff emerging from them, like the stuff for the Call Me By Your Name soundtrack is some of his best songs ever. Obviously the Carrie and Lowell live album was great.
Oh yeah.
Some great songs on the Planetarium collaborative album. What else was there? There was the Greatest Gift mixtape.
There's that. There's also the album he actually made with Lowell Brahms, which was called Aporia, I believe, which is kind of like a new age synth instrumental record that came out earlier this year.
Look, when you're speaking about Sufjan Stevens, you're talking about one of the most creatively minded individuals in all of music, I think. He doesn't seem to sit still. He seems to be at ease releasing tons of different musical projects. Like, there's also the BQE from 2009. How many people have heard that? I mean,
I haven't.
There's that Sisyphus band side project he did, right?
Yeah, with Serengeti and I can't remember who else, but basically a hip hop fusion project on there.
Basically, we're reviewing this because it is, I'd say, his first major proper album release, on the level of Age of Ads and Carrie and Lowell.
Yeah, definitely.
Since then, to some degree, and we just love Sufjan Stevens here. I mean, he's definitely one of my favourite musicians out currently. Obviously, his 2000s work alone is enough to cement that, but this is just his newest album, so we're reviewing it, basically. What did you think of The Ascension then, Ed?
Well, like we just mentioned, Sufjan really dips his toes in a lot of different styles and genres, but he still, I think, has a recognisable voice, both in a literal sense of his actual vocal and also the way he writes songs. But for me, The Ascension is probably the biggest change-up that I've had to get to grips with in his discography so far. Keeping in mind that I actually haven't heard The Age of Ads, which apparently is the album that this is the closest in sound to.
Okay, and you know what's crazy? I actually did listen to The Age of Ads for the first time.
Oh yeah.
In this last week. Kind of specifically to get an idea, because that is a huge gap in my Sufjan knowledge.
Yeah, mine too. I need to sort that out.
There wasn't a 10-year gap in between Illinois and Carrie and Lowell. That came out. There's the Avalanche. He was doing other stuff. There's also the All Delighted People EP, which I've never heard either.
One of his best, honestly.
Wow. Here's the weird thing is that he has experimented with electronic-ish stuff.
Oh yeah.
Since Enjoy Your Rabbit, that was a glitchy album.
Yeah.
So I guess he's always had the capacity and understanding to make something like this. But to hear it in full force on The Ascension, I can understand why it would take you a while to get to grips with it.
Yeah, well,
fully.
I'm used to these synth sounds from Sufjan because they were present even to an extent on Carrie and Lowell with the more ambient synth moments on that album. It was mostly acoustic, folksy instrumentation, but then there were these ambient incursions, and also the song 4th of July, which is primarily synth-driven.
True.
And Sisyphus as well. I actually think this album has a lot sonically in common with that album, even though the approach is completely different, and the tone especially is completely different. But I question how much I'm really going to be able to add to this discussion, as I've spent a week mulling over this record and I still haven't quite processed a great deal of what its immense 80-minute runtime has to offer. Having said that though, it has continued to grow on me, and I'm finding new things to dig about it every time I listen to it, which is a great sign.
That's a great sign.
But yeah, I figured I'd just make it clear that any thoughts I express here today are definitely not final. They're just early thoughts.
Subject to change, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. But, overall, I really like The Ascension. I don't think it's one of Suf's best records, but when it's going up against the likes of Michigan, Seven Swans, Illinois, and Carrie and Lowell, that's far from a put down. It develops a lot of the ambient and synth-based ideas that he's been toying with for quite a few years at this point, into something entirely focused on those elements. From what I can tell, there's no acoustic instrumentation to be heard here for the most part. Just mellow synths.
For the most part, there's obviously a few moments where guitars come in.
Yeah.
But even they're probably like electric guitars, really.
And they're heavily affected as well to fit the sort of electronic vibe of the album, I'd say. But
yeah, like this is
mainly,
probably the polar opposite from Seven Swans.
Yeah, mainly here you're hearing mellow synths and skittery mechanical programmed beats which have a strong IDM vibe at times. Though there is that fantastic affected guitar solo on the song Landslide that makes for one of the album's most cathartic moments, in tandem with the wailed vocal hook on that song, which I really love.
Yeah.
I'd say even though the album sticks to a fairly uniform production style, there is a lot of detail to be found in these songs. They have a tendency to unfold and reveal themselves further the more I listen to them, which is a quality that I really look for in music. Like I say, I've not heard The Age of Adz, so I don't know exactly how much of a leap into new territory Sufjan is taking here, but it's definitely a new sound to get to grips with for me, and just the sheer size of the album, 80 minutes, so many songs. It's not an epic in the same way that something like Illinois is. It's not grandiose. It doesn't have a ton of vocal layering going on or like super crazy song structures or anything, but it's big in its own way. And I think the emotional distance that Sufjan maintains on this album is kind of a new thing for him as well. It's really the polar opposite of Carrie and Lowell in that regard. I think he deliberately employs simplistic and detached songwriting in a sense on here. He's very vague, and the songs operate on these kind of anti-pop mantras. I mean, there are songs here that are very poppy, but I feel like it's a very melancholic album overall. But yeah, I think that in particular made it quite difficult to get to grips with, because it does sort of downplay a lot of the things about Sufjan's music that I've loved on the albums of his that I've been listening to for years. So I think it maybe took 2 or 3 listens to this for it to really click. But overall, yeah, I really like it.
Ed.
Yeah?
I think I fucking love this album. Lie.
Oh my god, really?
Okay, so I wasn't really sure about it to begin with, extremely begin with, just because of how heavily constructed and formulated the beats were. Like,
yeah.
I hadn't heard The Age of Adz either. I wasn't exactly the most acclimatized to hearing Sufjan in this way.
Mm-hmm.
I had, like, Planetarium has a couple of songs that are a bit more Indietronic.
Right.
In general, not really. I don't know what it is about this, even though it's really foreign sounding for me to hear Sufjan like this. Every listen, it grew and grew, even though I kind of immediately loved it. I just grew to really appreciate the craft and interest in parts of this album. The fit of it is, I think Sufjan is too good of a vocalist and songwriter to ever really dismiss, even if you don't really like what he's doing. Not saying you don't, not saying that was what you did. I've just seen a lot of people like dismiss this offhand, and that's their loss, because even though it took a minute to get used to, I think this is one of the most rewarding and ambitious albums I've heard this year. I think it's an incredibly brave album.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Parts of this are really hopeful, but parts are really painful and existential.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, the way I look at this is, you have a really excited, ambitious kind of synth pop album. Art pop, Indietronica. I don't know exactly how you'd call it. I've seen electro pop too.
I feel like it kind of has its own sound, and it really sticks to it, but it's impressive in that regard, yeah.
You have this album anyway, and then additionally, on top of that, the closing 3 tracks are kind of like an extra bonus part as well, because they're kind of like introspective, sprawling songs at the end that cap it off. Like, this album would have been good enough for me had it ended at Goodbye to All That. But those 3 songs at the end, like, take it to the next level for me.
Damn.
I don't know, man. I just really unexpected... Well, I'm not saying unexpectedly, because I love Sufjan. But, you know, it kind of had a pretty good, but somewhat tepid response, in a way.
I'd say divisive.
Divisive is maybe better.
Yeah.
Like, but I seem to be on the, like, really love side of the division. I don't know why I didn't expect that, but as soon as I heard Make an Offer I Cannot Refuse, I was like, whoa, this is something else.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say every song's amazing, but for the most part, I was just like, this is the most taken I've been with an album in a while.
Damn, wow. I'm really glad to hear that. I will say, like, I do think this album could have benefited from maybe cutting a few tracks, and if I had to whittle it down to any there, I'd say Gilgamesh and Ursa Major, probably the ones that appeal to me the least. Ursa Major has a really cool like vocal sample on it, but other than that, it doesn't do much for me.
Ursa Major, the title just makes you think it's a throwaway from Planetarium.
Kinda, yeah.
But really that is just a small part of the lyric and isn't a main part of what the song's actually about.
Sound-wise, it could have fit on there though.
It could have. So there's a few songs that have like vocal glitch in. There's that one. There's Lamentations.
Oh yeah. That one has a straight up IDM beat, like I'm not even gonna front. I love the skittery beat on that song.
Yeah, like I say, Enjoy Your Rabbit was really glitchy. I'm not saying like, oh, I did make that, didn't I? Well, I could implement that here, I guess. But even though Ursa Major is probably one of my lesser favourites too, basically at the end of the day, it's effectively quite a short song, really. It's not even 4 minutes, is it?
Yeah, relative to everything else, yeah, it's, just under 4 minutes.
It has enough catchy elements like the vocal glitching and I Wanna Love You parts that kind of just make it work for me. Like, I don't, even though you could say it's a bit of a lesser track, it doesn't matter. And coming after Ativan kind of contrasts with that quite well.
It's a bit of a cool down moment, I'll give it that. I wouldn't want to go straight from Ativan to Landslide, that's for sure.
No. That just makes me think Ursa Major was necessary here.
I just guess in itself, it's probably one of my least favourites here. I think I'd like Gilgamesh a little less, but yeah.
Even on the very best albums, unless it's the most consistent thing ever, there's going to be lesser tracks.
Yeah, and with 80 minutes of material here, it's hard to complain.
You'd expect this type of thing to be there.
I guess so. The thing is, I don't think this is a very testing album to listen to all the way through, even though I say I've been challenged by like trying to figure out how I feel about it as a whole. It's not a difficult album to listen to at all, in the slightest. Like, it's 80 minutes long and I've listened to it maybe 4 or 5 times now.
Same.
Despite having a very, very focused sound palette, the synths across this thing sound very similar. But I think there's enough little tweaks and enough different ideas from song to song to make it work for the vast majority of the track list.
I'd say it's a easier listen than like Illinois or Age of Ads. Like, not to say those are hard to get into, but there's more there that you have to like. There's so much going on.
Yeah.
It's so dense.
Obviously, I can't speak on Age of Ads, but Illinois. Yeah, that album gets a bit fillery towards the end. Truthfully, I'd say that album suffers from that problem. I have to say, you
cannot say that this gets fillery towards the end.
I wouldn't say so.
Some of the best tracks of the album are at the end here.
Yeah, the closing 3-track run, like you say, it really cements it on a higher level. I don't know if I would have been as happy with this had it ended on Goodbye to All That, but
like I would have been fine with it, but like those add to it. Obviously, like those are the last 22 minutes or more of this track. That's a quarter of the track length. So obviously,
pretty much, yeah.
A quarter of what makes this album good is those 3 songs,
and they are like a logical culmination of everything you've heard up until that point for various reasons.
Exactly.
Yeah. One of the best endings to an album I've heard this year. I just think the middle portion is like not on that level really for me. I think the album starts great and ends great, and then in the middle there's a couple of tracks that I really like, but other tracks that just reiterate other ideas that we've already heard, really. Everyone
has said like this album could have been better with My Rajneesh added in.
Yeah, I really, really, really like that song. I don't quite love it as much as other people seem to, but I don't think it would have fit on here, honestly.
Exactly, and to be honest, like that would have made it 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And people could say that, but the track exists. It's out there. You can listen to it.
Yeah, they seem to be... I've seen people saying that since before the album came out, so it really speaks to an ignorance to the idea of, like, an album narrative or concept, which this album is very rich in subject matter. So, like, throwing something like My Rajneesh into the mix when it doesn't tie in with the rest of the themes of the record in the same way that America does, it just wouldn't make sense. Like, as good of a song as it is, it just wouldn't make sense.
And can non-album singles not exist now without people saying it has to be in the album or it would have been better with it? Because, like, Do Ya Fin by Gorillaz, I mean, that technically could have been on Plastic Beach. But
I guess so, yeah.
It isn't, but it's also a great non-album single.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's plenty of examples of this. That is obviously a great, sprawling, lengthy track, but, it didn't have to be on here. and it wouldn't have fit, like you say.
I think it speaks more to people just, not caring so much about Sufjan's like non-main studio material and just really, really wanting to love this album rather than going in with, expectations as moderated as he can for something like this. I mean, I love Sufjan.
Yeah.
Obviously, I came into this wanting to love it, but I still try to have no expectations of what it's going to sound like, even having heard the singles. Because America and Video Game, which were the first two singles from this, are very big contrast to each other in terms of style, even though they share a lot of, sonic similarities.
America feels like the most Sufjan Stevens-esque song, if you know what I mean. Like one that you could imagine the guy who made Illinois make.
I'd say so.
So America is clearly can you call something that's at the end of an album a centerpiece? I guess you can. Well, that's like when something's in the midpoint, right?
Yeah, I guess so, but thematically a centerpiece. I see it that way, but I see it as a kind of an addendum as well.
Would you agree it's an all-encompassing endpoint?
Yeah, especially following up the title track.
Oh yeah, the title track, even though you may have loved America as a single, the title track adds so much to it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I actually was a little underwhelmed by America when I first heard it, but I had the thought in my head of like, this is going to work better in the context of the album because it's the closing track, and I was absolutely right, and I've upped my score for America since hearing it in the context of the album because it's just a great addendum to the themes of the album up until that point.
Yep. Like you say, I'm not sure if it's exactly the best album closer he's ever done, because Impossible Soul by the Age of Ads is something else. I'll just say that.
That one's like 26 minutes, right?
It is, and,
hopefully justifies that length.
I've never heard something that's more of a roller coaster ride of emotions and just takes you on a trip more than that song, really. I can't really talk about this without speaking about the themes the Ascension brings up.
Right.
Well, the whole album kind of boils up to, like, sad realizations of his hopes and dreams, like the loss of innocence and loss of hope for America, kind of.
But also, like, in a self-reflective sense of his spirituality and his religious devotion, I'd say.
Yeah, and that's all tied together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's different songs that speak to different aspects of that, with the Ascension kind of being like the culmination.
I think the Ascension is the song that makes it click all into place, because like I say, the lyricism on here is quite purposefully detached and vague, but the Ascension is the most direct song on the album and the most wordy song as well. Like,
there's songs on the rest of the album that could be directed at a person, really. Like Video Game.
Yeah.
But the Ascension, before getting to lyrics, probably has some of the best singing on the album.
Oh, yeah.
There is a specific paragraph or verse on here that I think are some of his best, most personal lyrics he's ever written. It's the one that begins with now it frightens me.
Oh, yeah.
The thought against my chest, that one.
Yeah. I mean, I feel that way about the whole song, to be honest.
But there's a specific one here that's like, that brings everything together that is unbelievable. It's like an admission that everything he dreamed of and hoped to change with his music and message and existence was futile, and how painful everything is to realize. I mean, fuck.
I'm sorry we bring this up in so many reviews, but it's such an especially potent message in the current state of the world as well. I'm so sorry.
We just brought it up in the Fleet Foxes one, but it's true.
It's true, though, because it's kind of like, you could see it as everything that's going on now is forcing this introspection that a lot of us, are blissful in kind of straying away from, and now it's just forcing it on us.
So, I mean, it is kind of like coming to terms, but at what cost?
Yeah.
Kind of song.
I'd say the last few lines of the song have kind of a nice, not uplifting, but definitely a sort of like accepting tone to them.
And with it ended with a lot of like what nows at the end.
Yeah.
It's like, what can he do now? It leaves everything unresolved.
Yeah.
Even if this song is an exaggeration of how he really feels, like, or it's not like how he ruminates on this every night, like sleepless nights.
It still gets to the core of those feelings.
It's still an extremely poignant and potent song.
Yeah.
And that obviously leads into America, which feels a bit detached from that, like narratively, like some distance between the different viewpoints in a way.
Yeah.
But still ties together.
The way I see it with the lyric on America, "Don't do to me what you did to America," it's kind of like, "Don't rip my soul from me like you did to this country," which maybe sounds a bit dramatic, but like.
But in the Ascension, it's like the fact that that can happen is really emotionally visceral.
Yeah.
This feels detached, like, okay, I've come to terms with everything in the Ascension.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't feel as cataclysmic.
Yeah.
It obviously is reinforced, the message from the Ascension. It's like he can look at America from afar and could separate his own personal hopes and dreams from it.
Yeah.
And it's like adding the hook you just mentioned with the "don't do to me what you did to yourself" back in vocal.
Oh, yeah. Do you see that as Sufjan sort of speaking to himself, or do you see it as more of an outcry against other people?
I saw it more as an outcry, but it could be that as well.
I see it the other way, honestly, but these songs are very open to interpretation, for sure, because like I said, they're quite vague lyrically.
And even beyond the lyrical allegories we're saying here, it's just so catchy as well.
Oh, yeah.
The vocal hooks. This is just great songwriting at its core. Classic Sufjan.
Even the devastating title track is one of the catchiest songs here, in a sense. Like, I love the refrains on that song.
Sort of. Not in a traditional way.
Not in a poppy
like
sense,
choruses.
but like...
Yeah.
I don't know, the vocal melodies really grabbed me on that song.
I will say America's length is kind of deceiving. It's not like... It is kind of like a 4 to 6 minute lyrical song.
Yeah.
That then descends into this otherworldly ambient musical bit that goes into almost new age.
Yeah.
It gets quite dark for a little bit, but then at the very end it emerges into something beautiful. I don't know what you made of that.
I pretty much completely agree. Yeah. It's a really great way to cap off the album because it encapsulates like the hopeful side of it and also the sort of despondent side, I'd say.
That was in the single though, right? It wasn't a single edit of the first 5 minutes, was it?
Oh, yeah, no, it was all in the single. It's just without that context of the rest of the album. I think Sufjan may have kind of been clowning on people to an extent.
I think so, because, like, as the lead single, it being, like, the cinematic ending of an 80-minute album, it works. It's fully understood. As a single, you might be thinking, is half of this album going to be ambient music?
Yeah.
But obviously it is, and obviously a lot of it is, like, synth-pop stuff.
Yeah, well, ramming up America against Video Game as the first two singles, it was a really good way of giving me no expectations for this album, because I was like, I don't know what this is going to be. It could be a completely varied thing.
How long after America was Video Game? Because I believe My Rajneesh was released in between.
Yeah, My Rajneesh was like a B-side to America, if I recall correctly, although it was released a week later for some reason. It just got added onto the track list of that single.
Fair.
But I think Video Game was about a month later. I don't know.
Fair. Still a good time before the album release.
And then it was great that Sugar was released as the third single, because I think that...
Oh, I didn't even know that.
I think that's a good sort of middle ground between the first two singles. I don't know if you'd agree with me there.
Definitely, I agree completely. Especially because Sugar has one of the best musical moments on the album, which is the opening 3 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, man.
I don't know if you agree with that.
No, it's one of my favourite tracks for sure.
I had a weird comparison point, right? So you know how that's obviously a really great build-up for the rest of Sugar? Because it has guitar, rolling like piano parts, so echoed backing vocal fins, and the beat is really steady and builds up for the first 3 minutes until Sufjan starts singing. It's so propulsive and steady, even though it's done in sort of an art pop indie way. The way it's built up and the momentum is generated, it feels like a progressive, like, electronic song to me, if you get me.
I'd say so, yeah.
No, it doesn't sound like anything, even though the whole album is more electronic. That part doesn't as much as some other songs, but I don't know, there's something really similar in the way it's constructed to me. But then obviously once you get into the actual singing, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's a very hooky song again, and it has kind of the mantra-esque songwriting of Video Game.
I mean, the constant resolution / hook of "Come on baby, give me some sugar" is great, as well as the sort of synth sound that plays underneath it.
Oh man, yeah, that little glitchy sort of, I love how it builds every time as well. It's not just the same thing repeated. It's like he's gradually automating these elements to keep them fresh
really
as it goes on.
Haunting, magical keyboard or synth part there. I'm not exactly sure. But...
Have you seen the video? Because the video's pretty amazing for it,
I have
honestly.
not. I will watch that.
Well, I won't spoil anything, but sadly it is cut down. Like it takes out the intro, but it's really great.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, we could go into favourite track picks now, I guess.
Yeah, sure thing.
Even though we kind of weirdly talked about 4 songs.
Yeah.
I mean, we were kind of focusing on the last 3 songs because they probably deserve a bit more focus than some of the others.
It's a good way of summarising the album, I'd say. But yeah, track picks.
I feel like I have to choose Make an Offer I Cannot Refuse. This might actually be one of the craziest songs he's ever done. A lot happens in just this one song that lays down a lot of the groundwork for the whole album.
Yeah.
I feel like the main vocals are some of the most emotive he's ever done. It captures an air of weird falsetto high-pitched singing that's really emotive. But the main thing that makes this song crazy is obviously the production and high-energy instrumental in between the verses.
Oh, yeah.
Gets so exciting, captures the nervous excitement, anticipation of the lyrics pretty spot on. Obviously, this climaxes and goes crazy towards the end. Obviously, the last minute and a half is a sort of weird extended climactic ending of the rest of the song. Yeah, that song, very good, right?
Yeah, I may as well say my piece on it because it's one of my track picks as well.
Sure.
Yeah, it has one of the best and most exciting builds on the album, and it really introduces you into its soundscape with the impact that you'd want from an opening track.
Yeah, I mean, this makes me want to hear the whole album again.
Yeah.
Even if, when I have a spare 80 minutes.
It gets very busy and bustling towards the end, but I think it accomplishes, keeping it all, progressive and not muddied together in a really good way.
Yeah.
There's a few other songs here. I think there's one song where it actually genuinely clips towards the end, and I don't think it was that necessary. I think it's the song...
I'm not sure which one that would... Maybe Death Star?
I think it's Ativan, actually.
It was Ativan, because I remember thinking, towards the very end, it was, getting quite glitchy to the point where that might have been what was happening.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I like the idea of it. I just think it's a weird moment where the mixing is a bit odd, but not the case for how Make Me an Offer I Cannot Refuse closes out. It's very climactic, the build is great, and it carries over into the next track in a really cool way, because the next track, Run Away With Me, is super somber by comparison.
Yeah, and that is another track pick of mine.
Oh, nice.
Although, I will say, I could see people maybe not digging it as much as some other songs here, but that is such a good come down after Make Me an Offer.
Definitely.
First of all, I'm not the only one who wanted it to maybe be a Carly Rae Jepsen cover. Right?
No, you're definitely not the only one.
He's kind of doing the right production sound where you could kind of facilitate that in a way.
I'd love to hear that song in this style, honestly.
Yeah. But anyway, Run Away With Me by Sufjan is actually more of a haunting, solemn pop song with a very dry vocal performance and very slow tempos.
Yeah.
I'd say even slower than mid-tempo. Yet it's very wistful and dreamy.
Yeah.
I don't want to compare it to Carly Rae Jepsen, but, the sentiment is kind of the same. Except kind of more of a wistful daydream hoping to run away with the lover.
Yeah.
Rather than the sudden rush of excitement of Carly's song.
Yeah, the way I see it is it ties in with the rest of the album in a sense of Sufjan kind of wanting to escape his own fate by confiding in another person. Because it really does sound so solemn and desperate in a way.
Very introspective, inward looking.
Yeah. It's not really a love song in that sense.
No. I just think this is really masterfully constructed, the instrumental. The way the keyboard parts, the vocals, and the sort of additional synths in the background, during the choruses are just really well constructed. Very, very good song.
Yeah.
Okay, I in a way, I'm kind of excluding the last 3 songs, even though technically they would be my 3 track picks. I'm just kind of talking about other songs.
That's
here.
fair enough, yeah.
Landslides, we mentioned before, is another one.
Nice.
Okay, so this one is a love song that uses a lot of religious imagery and metaphors within the context of a love song. I don't know if you saw it that way.
I haven't really dug into the lyrics on that song that much. Like I say, there's so much to delve into here, so I really need to do that.
The main thing of here is the way he yells out landslide in the choruses. The way he sings it is actually like a landslide of sinning. The sort of way it descends down the note.
Oh yeah.
So it's like landslide sinning in of itself. But then there's also what you mentioned, the nice guitar bit in the middle.
Oh yeah.
That instrumental
It's
break.
basically a solo, right?
It is a solo, and that makes it another highlight for me. I mean, there's other great stuff on here. I love the Death Star Goodbye to All That combo as well. Those another two good
yeah,
songs.
the chord progression on Death Star is really interesting. Like very, very sort of tied in with that new age vibe he was going with.
That's a weird one because the lead vocals aren't even the catchiest part. It's like the "I'm not looking for that" backing vocal
Yeah.
is really the catchiest part, and that backing vocal exists on "Goodbye to All That" as well. It's still there for half of that song,
Yeah,
so that's kind of cool.
they're an interesting combo. I love how it flows directly into that track as well.
Yeah, I mean those are my three picks. Additionally, I would say "Video Game" is inexplicably catchy. How is that so catchy?
And dare we say the most outrageous backlash to a song of the year?
Why? I don't get it. It's this is the most synth poppy song.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's the only one that goes for a vaguely nostalgic 80s sound. Like, obviously, every time I talk about synth pop nowadays, it's like, is it 80s nostalgia leaning? I felt that a little bit here.
Yeah, it's the progression of it, really, but it still confides into the soundscape of the album, which is great.
The beat progressions on here are really propulsive. And unlike Make Me an Offer, where he's sitting really high register and emotional, or Run Away With Me, which is quite a dry performance, he sings this quite straight. However, the vocal melodies are extremely infectious and word a minute, very fast. I mean, it's just a song about someone not wanting to be taken advantage of or playing the tricky games of love. But
well, I actually had like a kind of wild interpretation of it, and I think this speaks to
that's kind of a very surface level, basic interpretation. I had probably the most one that could maybe be ascertained, but I'd be interested in hearing yours.
Well, you say that, Alex, but I've seen people who've genuinely listened to this song and think that it's a Boomer Gets Angry at Video Games song, which is insane. Like, have you never heard of Metaphors? Like,
there's nothing about video games specific. There's nothing. He doesn't actually talk about video games.
It's just one line. Like, it's just one line. It's not enough to go on.
No, it's not. It's a metaphor allegory. Yeah. It's not even about video games in any way. It's just the actual action of trying to please this person is like the trial and error of a video game, or that is just a metaphor.
That is a really great interpretation, by the way. So I don't mean to dismiss it.
It might not be exactly right.
Well, that's the thing. Like I say, there's a detached vibe to the lyricism on this album, so you are going to ascertain your own meaning from it. I just think it's foolish to think that he's just being an old man shaking his fist at the clouds. Like,
he isn't.
He isn't.
In fact, you cannot say that, because if you really wanted to trash Sufjan like that, you cannot, because the production and stuff on this is extremely fresh and vibrant and experimental and brave for him. This is exactly the opposite of what like an old man boomer would want his music to sound like.
Yeah, and I think it's really daring to make a song like this as mellow as it is, and as catchy as it is at the same time.
Yeah.
My interpretation of it, I don't know how much you know about parasocialism, but I don't know why.
Not really.
I just couldn't help latching onto this song in that framework. Long story short, it's about the sort of fictitious relationship you have with artists who you've never met. So it's come into prominence more recently with like Let's Players on YouTube and stuff, kind of giving you the like more of a personal connection through the things they talk about in their videos.
Yeah.
So fans will feel compelled to think that they understand the people that they're, engaging with on that level, but they're never directly engaging with them. They're engaging with them through the lens of entertainment.
Very one way.
Yeah, and because the album has such strong themes, I mean, I've had this interpretation of the single since before I heard the album, so I'm happy that the album has like reinforced it, because it's Sufjan thinking about the impact of his music and looking inwardly about how it's affected him, having had this realization that we covered when talking about the title track. I feel like Video Game reflects on that parasocial context, like, for sure. Like, that's the lens through which I see it, of a lot of people confiding in his music as though they know him personally, rather than from a healthier emotional distance. And it's something that he explores with really deceptively simple lyrics that I think carry far more meaning and context than I feel people are giving them credit for. I feel like this should be obvious to everyone, but like we said, the song does not have anything to do with decrying video games. To me, the metaphor is that Sufjan doesn't want to be the protagonist of the game that other people are playing, if you get what I mean.
Well, I really like that interpretation too, but I also still like mine. So I'll just pretend both
they're
are
both
true.
equally valid. Like I feel like you can look at it in multiple ways.
It is genuinely cool that we both had different interpretations. I don't know why I default to it being about relationships. I mean, the majority of songs I listen to, I'll be honest, are about that. Like, they just are. I don't know why, but that seems to be the thing that brings out the creative energies of musicians a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a bit shallow or ignorant of me to assume that that's what Sufjan is specifically writing about. Like, I feel like on Tell Me You Love Me, that's a bit more fair.
Oh yeah, it's way more clear cut on that song.
But even then, that could be more about his religious beliefs.
Potentially, yeah. But do you want to know what the most genius thing about video game is?
Other than it being really catchy.
Well, yeah.
But, yeah.
Lyrically, though, thematically, I think it goes into those themes of wanting to disconnect from his audience. And at the same time, it makes the lyrics purposefully indirect. Like, so even the way the song is written is kind of playing into that theme. And that's just...
And the way it's received a little bit.
Exactly. Like, people are receiving it on a far more impersonal level than something like Illinois or Seven Swans.
Than how it's actually the subject matter could be addressed. And that is this secretly the most genius song ever?
It's probably the smartest pop song of the year.
Very shielded in how genius it may be, because on surface level it is just a really catchy song that has this secret message, maybe.
Potentially. I mean, that's how I read it, and it makes me happy thinking about it that way, because I think it's a subject that artists aren't really touching on, because it's kind of a new thing. It's not a new thing in the sense of it having been a pervasive thing in art and media consumption.
But maybe it's a new thing for the artist to notice and be bothered by.
I mean, I'm pretty sure the phrase parasocial has existed for a while, but it's only really being explored in like YouTube video essays and such lately. If I can go on a quick tangent, I've got to say, go and watch Shannon Strucci's videos on the topic. I think it's the Fake Friends series.
I think I will, because that's interesting to me.
Yeah. But yeah, video game, great song. Not even one of my picks, just because the level of quality here is
have we covered
great.
any of your picks other than Make Me an Offer I Cannot Refuse?
Yeah, we did talk about Ativan, and there's not much more I can add to that, but I think it shares a lot of qualities with songs like, Make Me an Offer I Cannot Refuse and Sugar, because it has an amazing build to it. Again, the way it's mixed towards the end is not perfect, but everything else about the song I really like. It's one of the most emotionally charged songs here, I'd say.
The way I see Ativan, it's probably a crux of the album. It's like questioning everything life has thrown at him.
Yeah.
Whether it's all part of a plan, what everything leads up to. I don't know why I thought this was almost like a midlife crisis type of thoughts here.
Maybe.
But maybe not. Maybe not. That's probably reading too much into it.
But musically, I just love
it was
that
not
song.
one of my favourites of the album, I have to say. But I do like it quite a bit. And I do think the beat sequencing is pretty deep and complex.
Oh, yeah. No, I love that about it. He repeats some of the same ideas on the album musically, like those complex beats, and also focuses on builds, but this is the song where it kind of all comes together for me the most. Like, lyrically, musically, just the progression of it. I just wish that, climax was, like, a bit more clearly mixed. That's my only issue with it.
And it's clear that he can make something that's a bit better sounding than that because of the end of America.
And also the ending of Die Happy, which almost made my top 3. That song is super melancholic and, like, despondent, but...
eerie and cold.
Yeah, there's an eeriness to it that's, like... It literally, the only lyrics on it are, I want to die happy, repeated over and over again.
When you're talking about something that every person on Earth has to agree is a universal truth. Nobody wants to die, but since we all have to one day, it's a universal truth that we all want to die happy. And the fact that that is true of, I imagine everyone.
You'd hope so.
I don't know. I'd hope everyone, but I cannot know that. It's... I mean, you could say that this is a mantra of the truth and repeated ad infinitum, and then you get all the reverberating echo effects and synth parts added in under the phrase, which is pretty powerful in of itself. It just makes it not repetitive or dull.
Yeah.
And obviously, around halfway through, it does explode into an exciting beat part.
Yeah, I love how it doesn't have a big
Which-
build like Sugar. It instead is really slow and mellow for half of it, and then the second half is just this huge cathartic explosion. It's not gradual, it's very instantaneous towards the end.
You could almost say the beginning is almost like ambient pop.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was your third
My
pick?
third pick was the title track, which we also covered.
Which is fair. I mean, I didn't consider them for some reason, even though they are like the three best songs. Why do I have such weird distinctions? Maybe it's because I actually see the last three separately in a way.
Guess so, yeah.
I don't know why. There's no reason why.
Those three songs just provide context in a way the rest of the album is. It's kind of like the answer to the question that is the rest of the album. That's how I'd put it.
I mean, there just are some albums where the last three tracks transcend a lot of the rest of it. I mean, everybody who's heard the Third Eye Blind album, the debut album.
Not me.
Okay, well, they love all the catchy pop hits at the start, but then there's the last three songs, which are pretty much everyone's three favourites once they've gotten to grips with the whole album. Like, there's some albums where the last three tracks transcend everything else.
Yeah, and we were talking about Deftones the other week, so White Pony kind of has that.
So yeah, we kind of covered everything that was good about the Ascension, but do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, I can summarize it pretty quickly. I think it delves deep into the spiritual elements of the album and the introspective elements, and it strikes me as a moment of realization for Sufjan, and it has the album's most poetic and devastating run of lyric. It's definitely a cathartic, bittersweet moment in a sense. Like, it is very dark, but like I say, towards the end it does have some hopefulness in it, and it has kind of a comforting feel to it. It's almost as if the sort of mood of the song is to calm him down from these feelings, and again, contrasting the music to the lyrical themes, like how he did with Video Game, is a really, really clever implementation of that. But yeah, it's such a cathartic moment for the album's narrative, because up until this point it's had that kind of vacant and distant feel on account of how simplistic and mantra-based a lot of the previous songs are. So, you know, I don't want to spoil many particular lines from it for people, because I think it is like a real aha moment.
I'm not going to lie, that verse in particular I was pointing to, you might not remember everything in it.
No, I know the bit you mean. It's my favourite moment on the album lyrically, so it's, you know, I agree with you there that it's like really powerful.
I won't say it though. I mean, I just want people to hear it, but
yeah, also just it shows the power of albums. I'll never understand why there's a lot of people out there who will just take individual tracks from an album and put them in a playlist, or just listen to stuff shuffled or whatever, because this shows the power of album sequencing, because it adds so much needed context to America by establishing Sufjan's headspace before transitioning directly into that song, which I think looks more outwardly and questions the worth of the art and messaging and devotion in the growing shadow of a turbulent socio-political context. Like, that's how I read it. If I didn't have the Ascension to parallel to America, I wouldn't have got as much out of either song, I don't think.
I mean, speaking to people who do that about album cuts and not process the album fully, it's fair to do that once you've understood the album it stems from.
Sure, yeah. I was talking about people who don't listen to albums at all. Like, I'll just never understand that, really.
I'll never understand why they decide that song, if they've never heard it before, is even worth doing it with.
Yeah.
That's so weird. But that I can see why that's a track pick for you. Yeah, I fucking love this album, like I've said. So I feel like Sufjan was really brave here, especially lyrically and musically, equally in different parts. Yes, this might be a slightly foreign sound for people who listen to Michigan, Illinois, Carrie and Lowell. Stick with it though. Sufjan is too good of a songwriter to dismiss this out of hand. I'm not entirely sure what genre this is, but it's definitely, it takes a little bit to get used to if you're not used to it. But I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10.
Nice.
It's weird because that means I have to think of it in terms of rivaling Illinois, and Carrie and Lowell. Well, actually, I do prefer Carrie and Lowell. That's a 10 out of 10 for me. Illinois is a 9. Michigan's an 8. Seven Swans is an 8. Age of Ads is a bordering on a 9.
Damn. Wow.
Safe to say I love Sufjan Stevens.
Yeah.
So, to me, I think this is really underrated already.
Yeah.
I hope it grows on people. Like, I'm not going to say this is going to be like Congratulations by MGMT, but it's not like that, like, unknowingly derided or underappreciated.
Yeah, that was just baffling for years.
Was baffling. I can understand to a degree people maybe not yet getting why this is so good. But I think this is like another masterpiece by him. I know you don't agree on that level, and I'm sure you can. I can see why. To me, I really love this album. Yeah, 9 out of 10, which is, yeah, I love it. I really love it.
Well, yeah, I don't love it quite as much. I guess because on more of a song-to-song basis, I'm not entirely sure anything other than the title track here I could describe as one of my absolute favourite songs of his, but I more appreciate...
Wow, well, I didn't even know you thought of that was that much, though, so I'm happy about that.
It's getting there. Like, it's a very, like I say, it's a very different album. It's very mellow. It's not really trying to reach the same heights as Illinois in an ambition sense. It's more ambitious in how sort of minimalist it is by comparison, even though there's a lot going on here instrumentally. But just keeping the vibe of the instrumentals as sort of focused as it is here, it makes for a better album experience than a song-to-song experience, I'd say, even though there are some really good highlights here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really need to wrestle with it more, because I feel like it could grow on me to a higher point value. I can't see it being a 9 for me.
No, like I'm aware that that's like a...
It's a prestigious score for me. Like, I never give 9s.
It's a prestigious score for me too.
Oh yeah, sure.
Like, but
I haven't given any 9s this year, just basing it on that.
That's fair. Like, I have given a few.
Like, I give a 10.
I haven't given a 10 though. I don't think
I've given a 10 to an album we haven't reviewed, and maybe we'll cover that later this year. But yeah, I don't know. I really like it. I think it's a great entry in Sufjan's discography, and like you say, it's brave. He could have just made Carrion Lowell too. Like, he obviously has the capacity to construct instrumentals on such a level of complexity and melodic appeal.
Well, he was only doing that, 2 years ago with Mystery of Love and that stuff from the Call Me As Your Name
Pretty much, yeah. And also the Tonya Harding song.
Call Me By Your Name, sorry.
The Tonya Harding song that was meant to be on I, Tonya, but then she hated it or something. I don't know. I never understood that.
What?
Yeah. Let's not get into that.
I mean, I was vaguely aware that wasn't on that, but
yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, these are subtle songs. Like, it's a subtly expansive album. That's the best way I can put it. And I really think maybe he could have cut out a few tracks, like I say. Ursa Major and Gilgamesh probably being the strongest contenders for that. And I think I'd agree
with
the album a bit more.
Gilgamesh, maybe.
Yeah, I think I'd like the album a bit more if he did that, because it'd give it more of a sense of brevity, at least relatively speaking. But yeah, those last 3 tracks really seal the deal for me. I'm gonna give it a 7 for now. Maybe a strong
fair.
7. I don't know.
7.5.
It's 7.5.
I know you don't work that way, but
just for you, Alex, I'll give it a 7.5.
I mean, the ratings for the person giving it.
Yeah, well, it's the same as a 7 for me, because I would have said a 7 minus if I was leaning towards a low 7, but.
Yeah.
It's a really good album.
I get you.
It's not as good as Carrion Lowell, in my opinion. Like,
no,
it
isn't.
I think it's an album that I have to be in the right mood to listen to, not just because of the length, but because just the sound of this album is so cohesive. Not necessarily to a fault, but you're not getting such immense variety here as an album like Illinois. But again, it's going for a completely different thing. And I really like the glitchy electronic vibes that he brings here. And it's got some of my favourite songs of the year, for sure.
Oh, yeah, same. Absolutely.
It's just that going up against Sufjan's best material, his best songs, there's really strong competition there. Like, really, really strong, especially from the last album.
The thing is, I actually almost equally enjoy Age of Ads as much, now that I discovered both the same week. which is kind of crazy.
Maybe if
in
I
a way,
check that
but
out, I'll get more into this style.
I think you'd actually really
Yeah.
love that. It is probably actually better than this. I don't know, but for some reason I have more of a visceral enjoyment of this one right now.
Right.
I feel like Age of Ads might acquiesce into my third favourite Sufjan album. Because obviously Illinois and Carrion Lowell are kind of an unfucking touchable, but
Yeah.
But, you know, right now, I'd actually say The Ascension's my third favourite.
Wow. I'm guessing Age of Ads captures a different mood from this album as well, right?
It does, and it is more of an expectant progression after Illinois. It actually does, like, go further. It is a really dense, complex album.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard this, but apparently when Age of Ads dropped, the reaction was as divisive as the reaction to this album is now.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that,
Yeah.
and I'm hoping maybe a similar sort of retrospective praise will be heaped on this one.
I feel like a lot of people are listening to this once and letting their expectations rule them a bit too much. I mean, if you don't like the album, you don't like the album. Like, it's completely fair, and you only put into the album as much as you think it justifies you putting into it. But I listened to this several times, not just because we got to review it, but I really liked it initially. It's just digging into the themes of it took a lot longer for me. But maybe it'll grow on me even more, so who knows?
I would have thought that Sufjan Stevens at this point would have built up enough goodwill that more people would have stuck with this than I've seen. And a lot of people are. I'm not going to just say it's like incredibly polarizing. It is to some degree, but, you know, it generally has had a favourable reception.
I think it's just relative to the level of excitement that America generated, and also the fact that this is a Sufjan Stevens album, a main album.
Yeah, like there's a different level of excitement generated here.
It's a main album, and his last main album was Carrion Lowell, which is regarded by many people as a emotional masterpiece. So, like...
And straight up one of the best albums ever.
Yeah.
Almost.
I don't know if I'd put it that high, but I can completely understand.
Well, I wouldn't either, but, you know, there's like, on some level, a lot of people will think that, especially best albums of last decade.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a bit of a more realistic thing to say.
It's a favourite of mine for sure, and it's got a bunch of my favourite songs of his on it as well. But, yeah. So does this one in a sense, I guess, but really cool album.
Yeah, so thanks for listening, guys. This was a surprisingly long review, but not as long as the album at least. A review of The Ascension by Sufjan Stevens. Let us know if you ascended into greatness with this album in the comments below.
Nice.
Or if you descended into diabolicalness.
Descended into disappointment.
You know, leave us that comment, leave us that like, leave us that sub. Yeah, thanks for listening. See ya.
Bye, guys.